Good evening, everyone. It is good to see you. Well, I don't see you, but it's good to be here this evening to discuss our RC chat for the evening, which is resilience and trauma. And this is sponsored by the Renaissance Center. If you want to reach out to the Renaissance Center, our number is 410-409-0025. So again, welcome. I'm Dr. Carla Debnam, and I am your host and your guest tonight. If you live in the Baltimore area, there is a storm coming through, and so my guest is without power or internet. So now we live off of power and Wi-Fi. So it's going to be me, and we will do our best to answer the questions you may have. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and someone will make sure I get them. So just to let you know, it's us tonight, me and you. So we're nice and cozy this evening. So our subject is trauma and resilience. And these are words that we hear a lot about now, especially with everything that's going on in our world and in our community and even in our families. We've experienced our own trauma and have had to be resilient on some level. So some of what we are going to discuss is not anything that is new, but it's just something that, we have to just be reminded of, that we don't have to rely on our own strength, but we all have the strength of God to help us through what we're going through. So I want to begin with the basic definition of trauma. And so trauma is a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. That's just the basic definition of trauma. It's deeply disturbing or distressing experience. So given that definition, 2 or 3 people could be in the same room, witness the same thing, and only one could be deeply distressed or disturbed, right? So everything isn't traumatic for everybody, or the same events don't, impact us the same. So we can't assume everyone is going to react the way we do when we are under pressure, under stress, under things that are can be harmful and even abnormal, can really impact some people greatly, and others just, continue on like nothing has happened. So that's a part of it. So a trauma, though, can cause an injury. So think about it. We think of physical trauma, right, as something that we can see. We can see the wound. We know, we broke our leg, whatever it could be. So that's a physical trauma. But when it comes to mental and emotional trauma, a lot of those wounds are unseen. And they're unseen, sometimes unacknowledged, unrecognized by even ourselves. We don't even know that we've experienced trauma until sometimes years or decades later, when behaviors start coming out, or we aren't able to make connections, healthy connections, or we are struggling with addictions and abuse. So sometimes those things can be what our trauma response. So at some point, even if we, at the moment of impact, right, we don't know that we're broken. Over time, life kinds of shows us that, hey, something's not quite right. I like to say it this way: if you don't feel like yourself, or if you see people around you and they don't seem like themselves, then that's, sometimes the time we can step in on our own behalf, on the behalf of others that may have some unacknowledged unrecognized experience of distress or a disturbing experience, which a lot of times when we experience these things, what happens is we block them. That's a protective factor. We kind of like our mind goes in another place. We, some people with severe traumatic experiences, block out years. I mean, they don't remember being 5. They see pictures of themselves being 5 to 7, but have no recollection of actually living that life of a 5-year-old. So that's extreme, trauma, an extreme response to a disturbing and distressing time in their life. So, like most mental health challenges, is a spectrum, right? So, what may be, again, trauma to you may not be trauma to me or other people, and our response to trauma can be different. So just keep that all in mind. So we hear these words a lot of times in our community or, on the news, not realizing that it's a spectrum of trauma. So it could be a little thing to you, but a big thing to someone else. So we have to have empathy. We can't discount what others are feeling or their response to what has been a trauma for them. I like to also clear this up, with trauma. And remember, I'm not the trauma expert, but I'm filling in. So I'm doing, some general trauma information right here. But in our particular community, the African American community, many of us grew up in trauma. What I like to say, we were born into this, from our ancestral past of being descendants of enslaved persons. That itself lends itself to some trauma. So, for instance, a lot of people are now doing ancestry.com or genealogy or finding their roots, like on PBS, they're doing their thing. Well, for many of us, we can go back, but so far, because we don't know, who some of the people in our family, uh, we don't know whose descendants we are. So we don't have the full picture because the people before us didn't have the full picture, and neither did those people. So sometimes our identity is not clear to us. And so that can be traumatic. I don't know who I am. I don't, know who my father is, my mother is. And that could even be current trauma for some people. Some people are like, hey, I was better off being raised by my grandparents. I'm doing fine. I'm glad my aunt and uncle, took me in when they did. And that can be good for some people, but some people that's troubling for. And that was a distressing, what? Disturbing time in their life once they realized, because some people don't know till they're an adult that they were adopted or cared for by other people in the community, which is, of course, the blessing of our community as well, is that we have the village. We have a lot of persons that have stepped up to help minimize our trauma response and experience. So some of us were born into traumatic situations. Some of us, again, forgot we had a trauma and now are living it out through our choices and our current lifestyles and different things that we're doing now as adults. And we don't know why we do them. It's just what I do. And that's our explanation. And it's a spectrum, though. So keep that in mind. It's a spectrum. So there are 3 different main types of trauma. Acute trauma is when it just happened. I just had the car accident, right? It's fresh in my mind. I just, got the divorce. That's fresh in my mind. So that's acute trauma. The thing just happened. So it's fresh, it's real, it's on the scene. This is just where I am. And again, some people it's distressing when these things happen. Some people it's not so distressing. So again, you may have experienced a divorce or accident or something else, or been let go from a job. That may not have been traumatic for you, but for someone else, it may be a traumatic experience. Chronic trauma, right? This is ongoing. This is abuse and neglect, right? This is child abuse, intimate partner violence. It is bullying, can be chronic trauma. You know, you don't want to go to school or go to work because of the atmosphere and the environment that is, you can't escape it. Then we have the chronic trauma from bullying, that of course is the cyberbullying, and just things are on the internet forever. You know, you can't get rid of it, can't take it down, it's there, it's done. And so those things can cause, you know, continuous chronic trauma. Then you have complex trauma, which I would say more of us have experienced than, you know, we would really realize. But it's a lot of different kinds of trauma at the, you know, over maybe a period of time or at the same time. So it's a something that it's hard to overcome because, for instance, people that have been away at war, they've seen a lot of things, they've had to do things, they've experienced things, they've had multiple traumas within a period of time that has made their healing journey more complicated. And so that's complex trauma. So some people, you know, even that haven't been in war, right? But maybe have uh, gotten divorced, which is a traumatic experience, lost their housing as a result, then lost a job. Maybe the other spouse got custody of the children, and that's a loss. Just so if you have all that at the same time, and you might say, wow, that's a lot at one time, but this does happen to people where they have multiple concerns at the same time. And that makes it complex and complicated to heal from. The reason I mention this as well is because we need to be sensitive to the people around us that may be experiencing, whether it's acute trauma, chronic trauma, or complex trauma. We don't know, they don't know. You know, we're not going to, dig deep and ask them all their business unless they're family members, right? Even then, you know, we might be surprised and wondering how the persons are making it. So understand that there's different levels of trauma. What traumatizes you may not traumatize your neighbor, and vice versa. So we got to keep that in mind. And so that's trauma in a nutshell. So what's resilience? You know, this is what our goal is, and then we'll talk about in between. Don't forget to put questions in the chat. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer those questions. So don't forget about the questions. So resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from the what? Difficulties and disturbances of life. So it's a mental toughness, though. It's not, hey, you know, you can't fake this. You know how we love to say, fake it till you make it? Well, that's not what resilience is. It isn't faking it. It really is a, uh, a skill. You know, it's something that you have to cultivate so that when tough times come, you are able to withstand it and keep your mental state well, because your mental state takes a hit when you have multiple traumas or even one trauma, when you have different things that could be, you know, going on that require you to be resilient. You have to keep bouncing back, keep bouncing back. keep bouncing back. One of the questions, I'm going to go to the question real quick. People can have multiple traumas, right? The person gets to decide what counts as trauma. Is that correct? Yes. The person decides what's traumatic. So think about it this way. You know how we have our family and friends. Oh, they just dramatic. They're just being dramatic. It's not that serious. I just was playing. I'm just teasing them. They know how I am. We don't know which button we're pushing, right? So for us, we were just being us or being, kidding around, but maybe it was one time too many, right? And now that person feels traumatized. Maybe it was one missed phone call. You never pick up when I call too many times. And that, is very disturbing to the person. We don't know. It's not always really big things that can keep people in bondage and have them feeling down and low. It could be some repeated, think about neglect. Neglect even can be in adult relationships where people say hi and you say hi and they never say hi back. You call people, we feel like that now. We call them, they don't call us back. We text them, they don't text us back. And then we like, well, what's going on here? And then you see them in person and they're like, oh, yeah, you did call me. Oh, I forgot. But for some people, a missed call, not responding, that becomes traumatic for them. And after 10 people have not responded, after 10 people didn't call them back. So sometimes it's not just the one person. It could be, oh, everybody treats me like this. And then it becomes traumatic for them. And it can be unconscious. You have internalized some of the trauma to the point where your trauma response is just automatic and people don't know where it's coming from. It seems like a shock to them, but you might be even a shock to you, like, where is this coming from? But it's after years or months of being treated a certain way, and then it's internalized and you've kind of brushed it off. And that's the opposite of resilience, because you're kind of taking it in, it's piling up. And one of the comments in the chat is somebody called one of the persons a trauma queen. Well, and I get it, because as people, especially in our field in mental health, yeah, we can kind of, say, oh, that's traumatic, that's traumatizing. And we might just say it, or even people just say it, as we know, it's a common term now, and not knowing what we're saying, because it really could be a traumatic experience for that person. And we can't know that unless they share. And so that's a part of it. And again, we can't tell people they're not traumatized. We can't tell them they're not, that it's not that big of a deal. It can be for them, and we have to respect that in the person. So resilience is, again, the capacity to recover quickly. So because we live in a world where we are dealing, I'm going to say, complex trauma, right? Not like in combat, right? Or not necessarily like people that have been abused and neglected, but in the sense that we have the racial trauma, we have economic challenges, we have the global pandemic, we have personal relationship challenges between families and friends. People are stretched and stressed, and that's can be traumatic for some people. We have people that are caregivers So that adds a level of stress, and it's not necessarily trauma, but these are the things that can wear down our resilience. So if I got to fight at home, right? Got to fight at work, I got to fight in the community, I have to fight in the culture and defend my right to exist every time I, leave the home. I have to defend my right to exist. You know, then that's a lot of pressure. And I might not ever say, I'm tired of defending my right to be here. I can go to this grocery store just like you. Nobody's saying that every day, but we see the looks, we get the different kinds of remarks and responses in the culture, and then we have it at work. So these things wear away at our resilience. So our resilience is our goal, to be able to just recover quickly, let the as they say, let the water roll off your back, like the duck's back. I'm back and I'm better. While we say these things, if you're not bouncing back like before, it's partly because you have multiple things going on that have kind of, whittled away. That's what I'm gonna call it. It's little by little. It's so subtle. You don't even know you can't bounce back until you need to. And then you're like, wow, I used to be able to take this. I used to be able to do this, that, and 5 things. And now I can only do 1 or nothing. So resilience is that. So keep that in mind. Resilience has its place, but it can be whittled away and worn down. So we're going to talk about how you can build up your resilience so that you can deal with the different traumas in your life. And I want to bring up a couple of, wait a minute, I have a question. When you can clearly see that a person has experienced mental trauma, what can you do to help them realize that they had a traumatic experience? So you're right. You might see that a person is not acting like they usually do, or you see or know that what they went through is traumatic. How do you help them recognize it? You can, if they feel okay talking about it, you can bring it up. If you feel like you have that kind of relationship, you can say, hey, I know you just, for many people, the loss of loved ones is traumatic. It's an acute trauma. I just lost them. And I don't know what I'm going to do. You can bring that up. Hey, I know you just lost your loved one, and if you need anything, I'm going to be checking on you just to make sure you're okay. So you can kind of slide in that this is a traumatic experience. Many of us have lived so much trauma that we don't know that it is trauma. For instance, some of us have had to move a lot, move every 6 months, every 9 months, every year. We moving from one place to another. I like to tease that we didn't move a lot, but we when we moved, we lived in the same zip code. So it's kind of funny. It's like, okay, we moved here, we're still in the same zip code the 4 times we moved. But some people move 4 times in 1 year. That could be a lot on a person, and they just think it's normal, so they can't settle down. So we might see trauma responses and reactions in them because they moved around a lot. So they don't know how to settle down. They don't know how to be comfortable being in one place, and things that other people might take for granted. They're like, sometimes their trauma response is hoarding. Well, we didn't have enough growing up. We always ran out. We had to share everything. So now we just keep buying and keep buying and keep buying until we can't even move around the house, the bedroom, the apartment. So if you feel like, you see something in a person and it's safe to say something, fine. Realize though, they may deny it. For instance, with COVID, a lot of people had to get on a ventilator or needed oxygen or some assistance to breathe. That's traumatic for some people. Now, they may not see it as traumatic. Oh, I had to do that because, it was part of the medical procedure. This was normal and customary and all that. But it was unexpected. You thought you were doing good. Then it took a turn for the worse. I mean, it was a lot that went into it before they got to that point. So that can be traumatic. But if the person that it happened to feels like, oh, that was normal, I'm cool, I'm good. But you, the caregiver or loved one, say, no, that was a lot. I think, that was a lot for you to go through. So if you want to talk about it, let me know. So that's how you could approach it. And maybe one day they'll talk to you about it. So we can't assume that they were traumatized by it, but we can probably realize maybe a year from now, 6 months, we might start seeing some things in people that have had traumatic experiences like, a hospitalization from COVID or from other things. So some everyday type things can be traumatic for some people. For others, it's like, oh, this is a part of my treatment process. These things are normal. I'm going to need a blood transfusion. I already know it. I'm cool. I'm going to go in and get mine and I'll be back home in a couple of days. So that is, how we can handle people we think are traumatized. And another thing you can do with people that you may assume are traumatized is if you note any change in behavior, you can say, hey, I noticed that you don't have the same kind of energy you used to have, or something changed, which could be subtle, but you being the loved one, friend, caregiver, have picked up on it. Maybe that's your entryway into saying, is it something, going on? And, hopefully they'll open up and you'll begin to peel those layers. Because remember, if I've been traumatized, I'm just pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down. And I don't even know how to begin with what the original trauma was, let alone the one that happened last month. So here's another question. They're helping me along. Thanks, y'all. Thanks for helping me with questions. Can trauma result in a person who makes everything about them? It could. It depends on your trauma. I think, I'm standing in for the expert. So if the experts want to correct me later, that's fine. But it can, because what happens is if I'm traumatized or have lived a life of abuse, neglect, or I've been the abuser and the one that neglected and the perpetrator of certain things and acts, then I might try to make amends by, lavishing people with gifts, making sure that I'm in their life, making sure my presence is known, because I'm making up for lost time. So maybe the trauma I caused is now causing me to kind of really try to be, overly involved in people's lives. Or it could be because I was traumatized that I now make everything about me because I was neglected, I was abused, I was rejected, those kinds of things. But it's hard to say if it's trauma or if it's their personality. Some people's, we don't talk about this, I have personality disorders that lend itself to them being the center of attention always. So trauma is an entryway for them to get the attention. I was just in a car accident. You didn't even check on me. It's like, you're always in a car accident every year. I mean, you know, not that it doesn't matter, but it's kind of like, oh, they were in another accident. Sometimes people that have a lot going on, you know, create trauma, and therefore sometimes people don't respond the way they would like them to, and so they create, I'm not going to say on purpose, somehow they create more trauma, so, or drama as we like to call it, to get the attention. And but it's usually at the root is neglect, abuse, and rejection. So we have to, you know, nobody's going to run around saying, you know, I've been abused, neglected, and rejected. That's why I act like this. Who's saying that? But it's coming out, you know, it's everybody can tell something's not right. Well, not everybody, but you know, the people that are close to you can tell. So that's why they're asking. So if you're one of the persons that have been abused, neglected, and rejected, that's not on you. That's not something you did to yourself. And so sometimes the way you act or respond to your trauma is the way you're being resilient. You're trying to make the best out of a tough situation, and you're trying to recover what? Quickly from difficulties. And this is how you recover. And it just may not be what other people are used to or accustomed to, but they don't know your story either. And that's why we have to appreciate we don't know everything about everybody, even our family members. We don't know everything about them. Some things are between them and God, and they're keeping them there, and they don't want us to know what they went through. So, but that's it. So, yes, trauma can make everything about you, or it can make everything about other people. Um, so it's the happy middle we want. You know, we want to get treated for the trauma if we need treatment. And there's plenty of treatment out here for people that's been through different kinds of traumas. There's support groups for if you've been sexually assaulted, if you have intimate partner violence, if you've gone through the military and had war experiences, you have support through the VA. They have groups and individual counseling. So it's plenty of things. If you have a chronic illness, we talked about this recently, which is a certain level of trauma because you got to keep up with it. You got to stay on top of your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your everything, your what's the things I can never think about this, but it is your vascular system. You got to make sure your blood flow is going right and all these things. This can be tiring and traumatic that I have to keep on top of this. It's a lot to keep, but it's support groups through those, you know, foundations. You have the Kidney Foundation, the Heart Association, you have you have the MS, lupus organizations, Alzheimer's. So you can get support for whatever stressors are causing you to experience some trauma. So keep that in mind, or you're responding to the trauma you've experienced as well. So some of our trauma is acute. Remember, it's happening now. Some is complex. There was a whole lot going on when you were growing up. When I was growing up, a whole lot was going on. So some of us been through a whole lot. So you don't just get rid of that overnight. And then some of it is chronic. It's just there. And this is where we have to build our resilience, because some of our trauma is just, it's something we got to learn to work through and work with. Do stigmas have an impact on trauma? Stigmas have an impact on everything that's mental health related, because we want to dismiss that any of these things really are a thing, right? We don't want to admit that we've been neglected, abused, and mistreated. Our parents and family and friends that may have witnessed some of these things don't want to acknowledge that um, that we were unhoused for a season and went from home to home, because then the parents feel like, well, I wasn't able to provide for my family. So we just kind of, get rid of that part, of our lives. Um, so the stigma is then that means I have to admit that I had a problem. So yeah, trauma comes with a stigma too, because people are like, oh, they still talking about it. They got the victim mentality. Well, I don't know if it's necessarily everybody doesn't have the victim mentality. It's just that some people remember their response to the trauma is different. So some people are at a level 10, some people at a 1. They're like, I know, daddy drank every week, but it didn't bother me. I just went and read a book. Whereas the other child in the home, like, he drank every week. I just couldn't stand it. And, now they're like have anxiety or some other kinds of things. And, it's such a thing as being an adult child of alcoholic. They have certain ways of being now, of living as a result of growing up in a home with an alcoholic. But you went to school with your classmates, you didn't know they were at home with the alcoholic, right? But now that you know and you see some of their ways as an adult, then you can say, oh, okay, I see they went through a lot. So it's a stigma. So we hide the trauma. We hide that our parents had addictions, or our spouse had addictions, or our children have addictions. So that's just addictions that can cause trauma that is stigmatizing. Many people that are sexually assaulted, they keep that a secret, or abused because it's usually a family member or friend. So they live with that their whole life. Then we find out, we're like, no wonder they act like that. We didn't know. So the stigma of trauma is deep because all of these things can be traumatic. Remember, on a spectrum. So somebody could bump into me and I'm thinking, oh, they just bumped into me. The other person they bump into, oh, look, you were trying to come on to me. No, I just bumped into you. But we don't know. So it might seem exaggerated, but we don't know. And we can't judge a person's response or reaction. We might try not understand it. And that's what I would say. So the stigma is there, but a lot of the trauma is things that we've internalized and haven't talked about. So some of these things that happened to us growing up affect us, later in life. So as I like to say, well, in my family, a lot of people have hypertension, right? So it's like, well, when did you start taking your high blood pressure medicine? It's kind of like a family thing. We all checking on did you start yours yet? Did you start yours yet? Because what? We normalized something that isn't normal. Everybody shouldn't have this problem in the family. It's something we could probably do something about it. But nobody, but of course we passed it from generation to generation, or whatever it is, the stress isn't going anywhere. So we all end up on, medicine for hypertension. And that's what I mean. So some stuff, it just runs through our bloodline and we normalize it. So some of the trauma has been normalized. But because it's been normalized, it doesn't mean it's gone. Again, hence the high blood pressure through the whole family. We just kind of kept it going, kept whatever got us traumatized and our blood pressure up in the beginning, besides being Black, right? is part is running through our DNA. So we have to look at that some of our trauma we pass on, addictions, running families, of course, medical conditions, like I mentioned, hypertension can run in families. And these things, both addictions and medical challenges, can become traumatic for the family members that experience them. So, and of course, the loved one that actually has these conditions. And so, while that's medical, we also have mental illnesses that run in families that cause people to act out and perpetrate and perpetuate trauma amongst the family. So that's some of the reason, why things keep happening in some families, because we just haven't dealt with it. Nobody talks about it. The family secrets, which it's like I could talk about that like every RC chat, because some family secrets are our trauma, and we've learned to be resilient. And as a result, got another question. Look, I haven't even really hit my questions, but thankfully the audience is on fire tonight. So, how can you become unassuming when it comes to other person's trauma or issues? So, is that unassuming? Is that the right word? How can you become? Let me figure out what they're saying. Maybe they'll clear it up a little bit for me. Oh, unbiased. Okay. How can you become unbiased? Okay. I think that's what, okay. I'm going to answer what I think they're saying. So, how can you become, I guess, just neutral? I'm going to say neutral when it comes to other person's trauma or issues. That might be what the question is. It's hard because we bring our humanity to our relationships, and we don't always understand why people do what they do. So it is hard to just, have compassion and just, patience with people, especially if they're not willing to share, what's going on, or even if, again, they don't even know what's going on because they've, stuffed it down so far, or haven't thought about it in a long time, because some of these things happen, a long time ago, or when they were a teenager or whatever. So they haven't thought about it in a while. But you can just try to just be a listening ear when they are willing to talk about their traumas. And, this is what we do. You all can admit it. Here we go again. When people tell the same story that they've told us before about their particular experience of sometimes of trauma, but that's helping them to kind of get through it. So, if we kind of shut them down whenever they do bring it up, that could be, closing that opportunity for them to be healed. So it's tough to just, grin and bear it when you're the caregiver or loved one of the person and who's sharing, who's been traumatized, who does go through their story quite often. And that could just be the way that they manage their stress, their trauma. So, okay, here it is. We got a clarification. I don't know if I was answering that right. That it seems that you have to never judge or assume what a person is going through. Okay, right. You can't judge a book by its cover, right? We don't know what people are going through. We have no idea what they bring to work, church, to dinner. If we just invite them out, we don't know what they are going through in their homes. So we have to, which is tough. This is where unconditional love is what we're called to do as Christians. This is where patience and kindness come in, the fruit of the spirit come in. It takes a lot because people that have been traumatized, again, that's of any kind, and they've been abused, neglected, rejected, abandoned, they're going to have some issues that are probably going to be lifelong. Doesn't mean they're going to act out their whole life or be a certain way, but they're going to go down memory lane periodically. And part of it is them kind of really encouraging themselves. It's like, wow, look how far I've come. This is my testimony. So for some people, their testimony is encouraging to them because they did make it through and their resilience showed up for them. Their resilience showed up for them. I'm going to answer 2 more questions, and then I want to go out with what it takes to be resilient, because the trauma is ever before us. It's always something happening, and whether it's happening directly to us or to other people around us. So do you think persons that serve the public, like teachers, should take a trauma-informed class to effectively serve persons? I think everybody should take a trauma-informed class to serve your family, your friends, church members, coworkers. Well, and basically, when it's trauma-informed, you don't have to be an expert, but just understand that people bring a lot with them to the table. And we just need to be sensitive and be aware that when they come into your waiting room cussing and fussing, or they're upset at the cashier and they, bring in, or they break down crying or whatever, they're bringing a lot with them to school, to work, and to the community. And if we just assume that that's just how they are without trying to figure out what's going on, maybe they caught 3 buses to get to the doctor appointment, and we know the doctor will keep you waiting for a half an hour, but you can't be 15 minutes late. You got to reschedule, and they're going off in the waiting room, whatever. We don't know what got them there. And so that's basically it. It's just being sensitive. We don't know people's journey, and we don't have to know. That's their business. But if they want to share their story, fine. But to me, trauma informed means I'm gonna just treat you like you a human being. You're a person. You're not a problem. When I see you, you're not a problem. You're a person. So if we start looking at people, as children, as seniors, and not as a problem, which is hard because, I run around saying this. We got people problems all the time, but people aren't our problem. People have problems, right? We should not identify people by their problems. So that's where the shift has to come in how we deal with people. Our mindset has to shift because people are not a problem. People have problems. I have problems. You have problems. We want people to be understanding and kind to us. So why can't we be understanding and kind to them? We don't have to agree, but we can hear them out. How does vicarious trauma affect individuals? So vicarious trauma is, no, it didn't happen to me, but I saw it or I heard it on the news. We hear a lot on the news, a lot of violence, a lot of disappointment, a lot of distress. The wildfires in California, the floods, in the forest, Yosemite Park, whatever it is, we heard about it, we saw a video. So vicarious trauma can have, again, acute symptoms, right? Yeah, I'm in the mix. I just heard about this on the news. Now I'm scared to go to the mall because, they're robbing people in the parking lot. So sometimes we have an immediate response to something we heard. We didn't experience it, but we heard it, we saw it, or aware of it. So that's what vicarious trauma. So it can affect you like it happened to you. So you really do have to be careful, do self-care, especially when you're in the helping profession, like myself, doctors, nurses, anybody in the medical field, EMTs, all those people we're exposed to vicarious trauma because we hear it, see it, witness it. It's all kinds, it's coming across our desks. If we're administrators, it's coming into our office or virtually. So you do have to be aware that some of these cases and exposures can, be a challenge, and you need to watch your own, symptoms so that you won't have a traumatic response, acute stress, post-traumatic stress. These things are real even for people that have not experienced it personally, but have been exposed. So keep that in mind. Like trauma on any level should not be normalized. Amen. That's a comment from a viewer, right? And again, remember it's personalized. My trauma is not yours. Some of your stuff I couldn't take, and some of my stuff you couldn't take. And that's really the gist of it. Some is bad across the board. Abuse, neglect, rejection, and abandonment, that stays with you. It comes out some kind of way. If you go back to why you do what you do, I bet you it's abuse, rejection, neglect, or abandonment. The top four. Well, something happens in those four that kind of can be traumatic at some point, or we have a trauma response. One comment is the more we talk about our trauma, we begin to heal. Right, you find a safe space and community. It's a book out. I haven't read it yet, but I love the title only because it's something I tell people in counseling or if I'm doing workshops. You got to find your people. When you find your people, it makes all the difference in your life. The quality of your life, how you feel about yourself. You've got to find your people. It might be one person, but they get you. You can talk about certain things, and you can connect with them. You got to find your people. Could be a group of people. You don't necessarily have to be close to them, but you've got to find your people. That helps with building resilience, having a safe, affirming community. So find your people. We're going to transition to resilience because I don't want you to think you're stuck in a life. We know we've been traumatized. We have post-traumatic stress disorder. We have post-traumatic slave syndrome from our enslaved ancestors. So some of the things we do, we don't know why we're doing. So just some things we just don't have any idea of why we save every button and we're never going to sew it back on. We just don't know why. I'm making light of that, but some of the stuff we do, we have absolutely no idea why, but it's because our ancestors made things out of scraps. They can make beauty from ashes, right? And so now we save everything. We might need it. I don't know. I might need it. So that's what we do. But so resilience is finding your people, right? Besides finding your people, resilience is being self-aware. That's a whole nother topic. That's emotional intelligence, but being self-aware. What do I need to feel okay? What do I need to feel safe? The more I know about what I need, Then I can find my people, right? Then I have social awareness. I got people I can connect with and be with that affirm me. I affirm myself. I know what I want. Mindfulness. It's about being in the moment, being aware of what your needs are. Again, this self-awareness piece is big because you have to know what you want. How are you going to build yourself up if you don't know what it is that builds you up? So take some time to spend some time with you. It's this song I've been listening to recently. I don't remember the name of the song, but one of the lines in the song he says is, um, love yourself like you're in love with yourself. I'm like, yes. Why don't you love yourself like you're in love with yourself? If you were in love with somebody, how would you treat them? Well, treat yourself the same way. That's building resilience because you're going to need that. The world already just keeps subtracting. You're going to need to keep adding. So that's a part of it. Positive relationships. I already said that. Find your people and have a purpose. We always hear about purpose. We're going to have to do another something else, a follow up. Look, when my expert can come on, we'll do a follow up to what this means to be resilient. Because if I find my people, healthy relationships, I have purpose, I'm self-aware, I love myself like I'm in love with myself. I love that line. I love that. So I'm gonna start loving myself like I'm in love with myself. And then I'm gonna, take some time to be thoughtful and prayerful about my next. So I hope you all had a great evening. We had a lot of great feedback from the audience. Thank you, audience. Give yourself a hand clap. And if you need to reach us, we are available at 410-409-0025. And you can always reach us at the renaissancecenter.org. Thank you for being on this journey with us. We're 21 this year, so we're grown now. So we have stood the test of time thanks to you. So I appreciate everyone that's helped us. We have a support team that, helps us keep it going. So we will see you the next time. And thanks again for tuning